She thought the ultimate betrayal was losing her husband to her sister. Until she discovered the baby her sister was carrying wasn't his. It was never about love, it was about control. What began as a birthday dinner turned into a brutal unraveling of lies, loyalty, and everything she thought she knew. But from the ashes of humiliation, she didn't just survive, she rose, stronger, unshakable, and finally free. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's the story of reclaiming your power. My name is Samantha Whitaker. I'm 32 years old, a senior marketing strategist at one of Chicago's most competitive firms. And until 3 months ago, I thought my life was on the perfect trajectory. I had the career, the house, and a marriage that appeared solid from the outside. But betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes, it arrives in the form of the people you trust most, the ones who once tucked you into bed as a child, or kissed your forehead before work. It all began with a text message. A simple one from my younger sister. Jessica, dinner on your birthday. Our treat. Don't be late. Jessica had always been the dramatic one in our family, the kind who turned minor setbacks into major events. But she was also charming, vivacious, and at least, until recently, single. The last I'd heard, she was seeing someone casually. She never said who, and I didn't press. We weren't close in the emotional sense, but we did the birthday thing, the holiday thing, and played nice for our parents. Kyle, my husband, was the picture of support. He told me he had a surprise planned after dinner, and I believed him. Why wouldn't I? We'd been together for nearly a decade. We'd survived infertility, job losses, the death of his father, and countless other struggles. He wasn't perfect, no. One is, but I thought we had weathered enough to call ourselves solid. The restaurant Jessica chose was an upscale spot overlooking the lake, full of white tablecloths and ambient lighting. My parents were already seated when we arrived. Jessica was late, of course, sweeping in 15 minutes after the reservation with her usual flair. What struck me wasn't the lateness, but the way Kyle stood up a little too fast when she entered. His eyes lingering a little too long. I told myself I was imagining things. Dinner began normally enough. Jessica toasted me with an expensive glass of champagne. My mother gushed over the promotion I had recently received, and my father cracked a few of his signature dry jokes. But, beneath the clatter of cutlery and polite conversation, I felt a strange tension humming just under the surface. Jessica kept glancing at Kyle. Kyle kept checking his watch. My mother avoided eye contact. My father looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. When the dessert arrived, my favorite, a dark chocolate torte with raspberry, coolest, Jessica cleared her throat. I have an announcement, she said. Everything stopped. Even the waiter hovering nearby froze, eyes wide as he registered the sudden change in atmosphere. Jessica placed both hands on the table and looked directly at me. I'm pregnant, she said, her voice trembling slightly, and ... Kyle's, the father. The words didn't register at first. My brain refused to process them, as if they were in a foreign language. I blinked. Excuse me, I said. Jessica looked down, then back up, her eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean for it to happen, Sam. It just did. We didn't plan it. I swear. I turned to Kyle, who was now as pale as the tablecloth. He didn't deny it. He didn't say a word. It was my birthday, my 32nd birthday, and my husband and my sister had chosen this moment, this setting to destroy me. I think I'm going to be sick, I said, rising from the table. My mother gasped. My father looked like he might punch Kyle. Jessica began to cry. Kyle finally found his voice. Sam, please, let me explain. No, I said. Not here. Not now. I walked straight out of the restaurant. I didn't even take my coat. The cold air hit me like a wall, but I kept walking until I reached the lakefront, where I stood staring at the water, trying not to collapse. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message from Kyle. Please come back. We need to talk. I blocked his number. That night, I checked into a hotel. I couldn't face going home. Not to the house we'd built together. Not to the bed where he'd held me and whispered empty promises. I stared at the ceiling for hours, every breath an effort, every thought a battlefield. By morning, I had made a decision. I would not be broken by this. I would not let their betrayal define me. I called Patricia Donovan, a high-powered divorce attorney whose card I had kept just in case. It's time, I told her, and just like that, the process of dismantling the life I thought I had began. In the weeks that followed, I learned how much people reveal when they think you're no longer listening. Friends I thought would stand by me disappeared. Others surprised me with their loyalty. My parents tried to remain neutral at first, until they realized the depth of Jessica's betrayal. My father took it especially hard. "She's not the girl we raised," he said one night over coffee. "I don't know who she is anymore." "I do," I replied. "She's always been like this. You just never wanted to see it." Kyle sent flowers, emails, and letters. I ignored them all. I told Patricia I wanted everything documented. Every infidelity, every lie. She was more than happy to oblige. "You're one of the calmest clients I've ever had," she told me during a meeting. "Most people are a mess by now." "I've already done my grieving," I said. "Now I'm rebuilding." It was true. Piece by piece, I began reconstructing the version of myself that had been buried under compromises, gaslighting, and second chances. I signed a lease on a new apartment. I redecorated it in colors Kyle would have hated: bold, unapologetic colors. I started going to therapy, not to cry over what I'd lost, but to understand why I tolerated it for so long. One night, 3 months after the birthday dinner that shattered my world, I received a text message from Jessica. "Can we talk? My sister." I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, "I don't know if I miss you." And I meant it. But the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because of the truth about Jessica's pregnancy, that was just the beginning. The morning after my birthday dinner, I woke up in a sterile hotel room with muted beige curtains and unfamiliar silence. The air was heavy, not just with the residue of last night's betrayal, but with the startling clarity that life as I knew it had ended. I rolled over and checked my phone. 27 missed calls. 13 voicemails. 48 unread messages. From Kyle, from Jessica, from Mom and Dad. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I tapped the name of the one person I knew wouldn't waste time on false sympathy. Patricia Donovan, my attorney. "It's time," I said when she picked up. My voice was raspier than usual, worn from emotion. "You sure?" she asked gently. Double quotes. "Yes, I want to file for divorce. Today. Come in at 11, I'll have everything ready." The next few days were a surreal mix of detachment and hyperfocus, while the emotional wreckage churned just under the surface. I latched onto the practical with a kind of surgical precision: filing paperwork, organizing finances, making lists of items I would take when I left the house. The one I shared with Kyle. Decorated with the kind of curated charm meant to signal happy marriage. Every throw pillow, every framed vacation photo, now felt like a weaponized lie. I couldn't bear to go back alone, so, 3 days after my birthday, while Kyle was at work, I returned with 2 friends and a moving company. I packed only what was unquestionably mine: my clothes, personal items, and furniture I'd owned before our marriage. I left everything else, even the wedding album, lying in the dresser where he kept his watches. On the nightstand, I placed my wedding ring in a velvet box. Next to it, a handwritten note. "Patricia will contact you regarding the rest." Megan, my best friend since college, offered her guest room with zero hesitation. "Stay as long as you need," she said, handing me a spare key. The moment we dropped my last box on the floor of her apartment, I collapsed into her arms and cried harder than I had in years. "You're not weak," she whispered. "You're healing." That became our mantra. Every time I wavered, every time I ached, every time I hated myself for still caring: "You're not weak. You're healing." But healing didn't come easily. Kyle showed up at Megan's place the following evening, pounding on the door like a man possessed. His voice echoed down the hallway. "Sam, please, just talk to me. We can fix this." Megan, her phone in hand, whispered, "You want me to call the cops?" I stood behind the door, motionless. Then I shook my head. "No, let him shout. That's all he has left." He didn't stop until a neighbor threatened to call security. As he walked away, I heard him mutter, "This isn't fair. You didn't even give me a chance to explain." But I had given him years of chances. He chose Jessica. Now, I chose myself. Later that night, Jessica called. I stared at her name on my screen until the ringing stopped. She called again. On the 3rd attempt, I picked up. "Sam." Her voice was thin, frightened. "I think we've said everything that needs saying," I replied flatly. I know I don't deserve anything, but I'm scared." I said nothing. "I'm pregnant with a married man's baby. Kyle won't return my calls now either." Her voice cracked, "I need my sister." I laughed, sharp, cold. "You needed your sister before you climbed into her husband's bed." I wasn't thinking straight. I just wanted what you had. There it was. Jessica had always measured herself by what she could take from me. My friends, my praise, my spotlight, and now, my husband. Congratulations, I said. Now neither of us has it. I hope it was worth it. I hung up before she could answer. My parents called next. Mom, clinging to her delusions, suggested family therapy. Jessica made a mistake, Samantha, but she's family. And she's going to need support. You support her, I said, voice razor sharp. I'm done being her crash mat. Dad was quiet for a while. Then, surprisingly, said, You're right to be angry. What they did was inexcusable. But don't let it poison your future. I'm not, I replied. That's why I'm moving on. By the end of the second week, I'd frozen our joint accounts. Kyle was furious. Real mature, Sam, he texted. I guess freezing the money is easier than facing me. I forwarded the message to Patricia. She responded within an hour. He's rattled. Stick to the plan. The prenup is airtight. I nodded to myself. Kyle could try to guilt me, but he'd never see a dime beyond what was fair. For once, he was the one losing control. In the weeks that followed, I rented a one-bedroom apartment. In a part of the city Kyle never liked. He said it was too trendy, which meant it was full of life. I painted the walls sea glass blue. Bought new furniture. Installed bookshelves I didn't have to ask permission for. I even got a Catamoody rescue named Luna, who reminded me of myself. Cautious, but curious. I went back to work, head down, focused. Only one person from the office dared to break the invisible line around me. David, from creative. He began leaving. Small coffees on my desk with handwritten notes. Hang in there. They lost the best thing they ever had. You've got this. I never replied, but I never threw them away either. Then, Jessica appeared at my new door. I don't know how she found my address. Maybe Mom. Maybe her detective methods. She looked like a ghost, pale, crying, makeup smudged. Kyle's been cheating on me. She said immediately. Some woman from his office. Can you believe it? I could. Easily, yes. Jessica. That's what cheaters do. They cheat. She blinked. I thought we were different. I thought he loved me. I leaned against the doorframe. What do you want from me? A place to stay? A hug? Advice? I shook my head. You burned that bridge. Tears ran down her cheeks. I just want my sister back. I stared at her for a long time, and for a moment, just a breath, I remembered us as little girls. 2 blonde pigtails, shared dolls, secret forts, laughter. But that was a lifetime ago. I'm not ready to forgive you, I said finally. Maybe one day, but not now. She nodded and turned away. I watched her walk down the hallway and realized that for the first time I wasn't the one chasing after her. A month after my birthday, Patricia called. Kyle signed. The divorce is final. No courtroom drama. Number. Appeals. Just a signature and a sigh. Most cases drag on. She added. Yours was almost too clean. There was already enough mess outside the paperwork. I replied. That night, I opened a bottle of wine, sat on my balcony, watched the city flicker with indifference. A text came in from David. Drinks after work tomorrow. No pressure, but you're welcome. I smiled, typed back. Thanks, I might come. It wasn't a promise. Not to David, not to anything serious. Just a maybe. But after everything I'd survived, maybe felt like hope. 3 weeks after my birthday, dinner detonated my life. I stood in the living room of my new apartment barefoot, wine glass in hand, lights dimmed. Luna curled on the windowsill and realized something I hadn't felt in months, peace. It was fragile, quiet, the kind that trembles beneath the weight of a memory. But it was mine. I had carved out a sliver of stillness from the wreckage. A place no longer haunted by lies. At work, I threw myself into strategy decks and branding campaigns like they were life rafts. The only thing more organized than my inbox was my emotional detachment. My colleagues respected the invisible moat I built around myself. All except David, whose quiet persistence was neither invasive nor performative. He never pushed. Instead, he left me space, and coffee, and handwritten notes that never asked for anything in return. That Friday, after we wrapped a difficult pitch for a tech client, he knocked on my office door. Drinks? He asked. I hesitated. He grinned. It's not a date, just a debrief. I nodded slowly. Okay, just one. We ended up staying for 3 hours. The rooftop bar buzzed with afterwork chatter, but David made it feel like we were in our world. We talked about books, podcasts, bad bosses, family dynamics. He never brought up my ex. Never once asked about that dinner. I appreciated the silence around it more than any sympathy, but then he said, "You know, you're the calmest person I've ever met who survived a hurricane." Raised an eyebrow, he shrugged. "You don't talk about it, but I can see it in how carefully you choose every word. You've rebuilt your house with fireproof walls." I stared at my drink. "Some walls are necessary." "True," he said. "But eventually, you'll want windows." The next week, I visited my parents for dinner, a tentative step toward reconnecting. Mom greeted me with too much cheer, as though forced normalcy might erase the past. Dad was quieter. Guilt was tucked in his eyes. Jessica, I learned, had moved in with the father of her baby, a pharmaceutical executive named Richard. Divorced now, trying to play house with her in the suburbs. "She's trying," Mom said cautiously, stirring her tea. "And she asks about you often." "I'm not ready," I replied. Dad sighed. "We didn't protect you the way we should have." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest they'd ever come to one. A few days later, a handwritten letter arrived in the mail. Jessica's slanted cursive covered 3 full pages. "I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I spent my life competing with you, why I chased after what you had, rather than figuring out who I wanted to be. I always felt I had to be exceptional to earn attention. You were loved for being steady, reliable, and I resented that. Now I realize neither of us got what we needed, just in different ways. I'm not asking for forgiveness, only understanding. Leo deserves a mother who breaks the cycle. I'm trying." I sat with that letter for a long time, rereading the lines until they blurred. Something in her words felt real, painfully honest, stripped of drama. That weekend, I drove to her house. Jessica answered the door in sweatpants, Leo on her hip. He was tiny, just a few months old, big eyes, soft hair, unaware of the mess that had brought him into the world. When she handed him to me, I expected to feel resentment, but instead, I felt peace, a strange, soft ache. Not regret, exactly, not longing, just a quiet acknowledgement that life had moved on and I had too. "He's beautiful," I said, gently rocking him. Jessica watched me with wet eyes. "Would you consider being his godmother?" I looked at her. For the first time in years, she wasn't a rival. She was just a woman trying not to drown. I'd be honored. After that, our relationship didn't magically repair, but something began to mend. We met occasionally, texted cautiously. No late-night phone calls, no emotional demands, just presence. Baby steps. Boundaries. A delicate rebirth of something that had never quite lived right in the first place. Kyle, meanwhile, had moved to Denver. A clean break. He didn't ask about Leo. He barely asked about the divorce, beyond signing the papers Patricia sent. He was someone else's problem now, and I no longer needed to understand him. That realization was the real closure. As winter gave way to spring, David and I continued orbiting closer. He walked me to my car after late meetings, shared playlists, made me laugh in ways I'd forgotten how to. One evening, over dinner, he asked gently, "Do you think you'll ever date again?" I didn't flinch. "I don't know, maybe." Slowly, he smiled. "That's fair." And that was the thing about David. He never rushed. He never needed to be the hero of my story. He was just there, solid, kind, whole. Exactly what I hadn't known I needed. On the anniversary of the birthday dinner, the night everything fell apart, threw a small dinner party at my apartment. Megan, my parents, Jessica and Leo, David, a few work friends, no surprises. No drama, just laughter, warm lights, and homemade pasta. When the cake arrived, my friends raised their glasses. To Sam, Megan toasted. For walking through hell, and making it look like a runway. Everyone laughed. Even my dad. I stood there for a moment, holding my wine, overwhelmed by the ordinary beauty of it all. No pretense, no performance, just a room full of people who saw me. Not as a perfect daughter or a wife or a brand strategist, but as me, whole. Healed. Here. 1 year after the dinner that shattered my life, I stood at my window in the apartment I now called home, watching the city flicker beneath a summer dusk, warm air brushing my skin, the quiet hum of contentment filling the space where grief once roared. It wasn't that I was over what happened. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It just means the pain doesn't anchor you anymore. The divorce had been finalized 6 months earlier. Kyle didn't contest the prenup. Patricia had prepared so thoroughly, emails, financial records, even voicemails, that dragging it out would have only humiliated him further. He walked away with his business shares. I kept what I'd earned, my investments, my retirement, half the equity from our house. More importantly, I kept my peace. He sent a final text when the papers were stamped. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you find real happiness. I didn't. Replied. Jessica gave birth to Leo 3 months ago. I visited her a week after he was born, her hair messy, her eyes rimmed in fatigue, and yet, she looked more grounded than I'd ever seen her. She handed me the baby with a tired smile. He cries all the time and won't latch properly, but he looks at me like I'm the only person in the universe. Leo had Jessica's chin, my father's eyes, and, thankfully, none of Kyle's features. Richard, the father, had left his wife, moved in with Jessica, and was trying to step up whether he'd last. That was a story yet to be written. But Jessica, she was trying. Weeks after Leo's birth, a letter arrived in a pale blue envelope. Jessica's handwriting filled 4 pages. I'm in therapy again. Real therapy, not the I go once and complain about our parents kind. I've been unlearning the lies I told myself for years. I spent so long chasing your life because I thought it came with love, that if I stole your light, I'd feel whole. But you weren't the one missing something. I was. Leo changed everything. I can't undo the pain I caused, but I can promise you this: I'll never be that sister again. Not to you, not to him. I don't expect forgiveness, but if there's room in your heart someday, I'll be here. I cried when I read it. Not out of pain, but because of something I'd stopped expecting from Jessica: accountability. That summer, I began opening doors I'd once bolted shut. One of them led to David. It started slowly. Afternoon coffee turned into Saturday brunch. Saturday brunch turned into long evening walks. And one evening, after we watched a film at my place, he reached for my hand. No pressure. No urgency. Just presence. He leaned in, kissed me gently, and whispered, "Only if you want this." And I did. Not because I needed someone to rescue me, but because I'd rescued myself. And now, I could choose. A few weeks before my next birthday, I invited everyone who mattered for dinner. My friends, my parents, Jessica, David, Leo, in his tiny boatie. I wore a simple black dress, hair pulled back, smile real, not forced. There was no announcement. No confession, just a celebration. "Happy birthday," Megan toasted, raising her glass. "To Sam, who proved you can rise from betrayal, plant a garden in the ashes, and still bloom." After dessert, my father found me on the balcony. "You've become someone I admire," he said softly. "Not just for surviving, but for not letting bitterness grow where love could still live." I placed my hand on his. "I had to learn that love isn't about loyalty to people who break you. It's about choosing yourself." Again and again, he nodded. "I think I'm still learning that." "We all are," I replied. Later, David and I sat on the couch, my head on his shoulder. "You ready for another year?" he asked. I smiled. "I think I finally am." The next morning, I unwrapped his Giffa, soft leather journal. The first page held a quote, hand-lettered in his familiar script: "The most beautiful people are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths." Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stares welled in my eyes, but they didn't sting. Because I wasn't sad. I was free. I walk into a boardroom, confident and calm. The team rises. I take my place at the head of the table. Clients trust me not just because I know strategy, but because I've rebuilt something from nothing. And when they ask how I navigate pressure, betrayal, and power plays, I smile and simply say, because I know exactly who I am now. And no one gets to take that from me again. If you've ever been betrayed by those closest to you, if you've rebuilt from wreckage you never caused, if you've found your way back to your strength, then this story is yours too. We don't just survive, we rise, and we become something even more beautiful than before.